be great to be able to be a nationally recognized artist? How wonderful to have that kind of talent and passion appreciated by so many. Well, that's not enough to describe today's guest. I'm Charna Davis-Wiese, and on today's UCF in Print, we meet a man who can create beautiful images with color and form, and also with a written word. Wait until you see some of these books. Please join me in welcoming Madison Francis. And you know, after we met for the first time, I went home and I Googled you, which I probably should have done before we met. And I went, oh my, this is Smithsonian. I mean, you've reached very high honors in the art world.
Well, I've been lucky and hardworking. I think both of those
and
things
enjoy
help.
it, obviously. You love it.
I do.
But then what happened to, what did a day come where you thought, I also want to write, or was it something you always did, or was it just a total natural outgrowth of what you were doing?
Well, it was an outgrowth in some ways of what I was doing. People, often when you do an exhibition, people ask you to describe the work or talk about the work, and I found out really people don't want you to talk about the work. What they really want is to hear you talk and to see what your sense of humor or your sort of main passions are.
They want to get a sense of you.
They want to get a sense of you, and it's probably better to tell them a story that parallels the work rather than actually talk about the artwork and steal the magic of the visual work. So I started telling stories that related to my work, and then I started writing the stories down so that I'd tell them the same way every time, and then I realized I had short stories, and that's sort of how the process began.
And you know, it makes a lot of sense, because when you have something by an artist, you not only want to have a name on that canvas or the woodcut or whatever, or the sculpture, you want to have a sense of the human being that made that, because that's what makes it come to life, because it is a part of your soul as an artist, every work you do.
Well, I think that's absolutely true, and I think as well, you know, I think artists struggle to be more like everybody else. It's a more interesting struggle than people imagine, I think. You know, I think sometimes artists think they're eccentrics or they try to be different, but in fact I think the really good ones try to be like everybody else, because I mean the real struggle is to communicate with everybody. So the more things you share, the more things you can.
And that's what you do through your art anyway.
Exactly.
And you do it in two different forms. These books are just so beautiful. And let me tell you guys, this is not the kind of thing, I know after everybody watches this, they're going to want to go out to Borders or Books A Million or Amazon.com and find these, but you're not going to be able to do this.
Right.
You have to contact Key and get these, because these are works of art. Can we show them?
Sure.
Show them right now. I've got to show the Dixie Compass.
Okay.
I am in love with the Dixie Compass. Take a look at this and explain to us, Key, if you will, how this is made. This is a process that is much more difficult than the average book. Here we go. I'll hold this side.
Well, all of the books are printed in traditional methods, mostly hand-set type, lead type, wood type, and the images, though some of the images are digital, most of the images are carved woodcuts, hand-carved woodcuts with lead type insets. And there's an effort, I think, to base the stories on a theme and then design an image that matches the theme and print them in color. Now each color on the page would be one carving of a wooden block. So if you have 5 colors on a page, that would be 5 wooden blocks that had been hand carved to create this image and then printed on a press one sheet at a time on dampened paper. So the process itself is laborious, but we're not really interested in being antiquarians. There's a unique look to the page when you print this way. The blacks are richer, the color is unique, not like 4-color process color.
It's beautiful.
And I think you end up with a work of art that is somewhat different than most of the printed art books. So to understand the difference between a book which is a work of art and a book about art, it's two different things. And I think you know, there's an evolution, I think, in the sort of the history of artists' books, and that's really something that we teach in the department, and something that we explore. This idea that artists actually could make books. Artists could take traditional processes that maybe are outmoded by contemporary standards, have been replaced by.
But only replaced because of ease and cost, and
right,
not
and
necessarily
cost.
because the new ways are better.
Exactly. Yeah, I think those are the kind of things that that are, it's interesting to explore what actually makes part of a process better, and what actually is unique to the field.
Right.
So in this case, there's all of this is hand set wood type from the late 1800s. So we're using materials and processes that go back really traditionally to around the 1500s, and I mean exactly what Gutenberg did, really. I think not that much different, but
they're beautiful.
But the processes are, I think,
here we go,
create a unique work of art.
Because the books are works of art.
Right.
They're not only books. You have the words, but you also have this incredible. Every letter is painstakingly done. Look at that. It's so beautiful.
Well, this book was done. It was the first book we did when we came to UCF, and Robert Rivers and I. Robert's in the art department, teaches drawing and printmaking. Did a collaboration. I would write a story, and he would do an image or an etching from it, and then he would send me a drawing or an etching, and I'd write a short story or poem about it.
Right.
And it was a collaboration that's gone on now for a while. I think we're up to about 12 stories, which would be the bestiary I was talking about. And he's probably got 25 etchings or 25 images that he's done for this book. And so we're working along on that. And then, as I said, I'm working on this book about artists, the artist stories. It's a group of short stories. I think I'm up to about 15 now.
And that, what's going to happen though, even though you've got the voice on the page, your fans are still going to want a piece of you. They're going to want more.
Well, I think that'll be interesting. If I can figure out how to deliver more, I will.
How to deliver more.
Yeah.
Can you do a reading for us?
Sure, I'd love to read several pieces. One I thought would be the work. I think the work as matches my voice, has a certain southern flavor to it. We were talking about it maybe being more rural than southern.
I know when you go to the Dixie Compass, the compass, all the points point south, I noticed. But I was driving my husband crazy very late at night. He had just gotten home from work, and I kept saying, "Come on in here, I've got to read this to you," because the points could have been facing Middle West, because it was so what I experienced going to his little hometown. It's everybody's little hometown, it seems.
I think it is. This, I thought, was descriptive of the Mississippi Delta, and maybe a page that is an interesting page to read. Close to 10 miles of winding Delta Road separate Booga Bottom from the famous Highway 61. The old Blacktop Road is the spinal cord of the Mississippi Delta and runs straight through some of the richest farmland in the world. There are places there where the topsoil is 16 feet thick. It's as if the richest top few inches of the whole of Midwest farmland had been graded with a D7 Caterpillar for 10 million years, all of it hauled to the state of Mississippi. Anything can grow there. Just throw out the seeds and back up out of the way. To live with the stored up, near or overpowering fecundity of the land could change how one looked at life, or it might not change anything. That would just depend on what sort of things the person held sacred. More than that, it would depend on one's vision of the place, and true vision depends as much on philosophy as it does on sight. This land is immense. The fields and clearings edge wooded sections that start in the subconscious peripheral visions and continue through that focused part of sight to the subconscious and peripheral on the other side. It is a vision that is working even when the eyes are focused on something else. It is either God and one worships it, or it gives you the blues. There's no in between. Worship it or suffer under it. This day and age we suffer under it. It's how we are.
You describe the South, you describe your home so vividly, so beautifully, and I wondered, you're very far removed from Mississippi here. The lifestyle, the atmosphere, the geology, the geography. Do you miss it?
Well, I think by the time I left, I was removed. It had removed itself from me anyway. I think things have changed so much across America. I think things have changed so much in the last 15 or 20 years.
So is this your way of going back?
I think in some ways it is.
The way it was, the way you liked it best?
Well, I think it's maybe a way of showing some of the parts that you can't see, holding on to some of the beautiful things about the land, people's relationship to the land and to each other.
It's so true. You talk about people's relationship, and I so enjoyed, and here I go back to Dixie Compass again, the part where you talked about the banker who came to town to run the bank.
Right.
And that everybody in the town, Redmond, everybody knew everybody's mother and father and grandfather and great-grandparents. So the man who came here to run the bank was Mr. Raymond.
Yeah.
And no matter what he did, they were going to call him Mr. Raymond because they didn't know his grandparents.
Exactly. And he's in such a hurry to be accepted and in such a hurry to make up that generational gap, which he doesn't have, that he never fits in because he's always in too big a hurry to fit in.
And people in the rural areas, they're not in a hurry.
Nobody's in a hurry.
Yeah, he's not going to be from there. And it's different from here in Central Florida. I mean, once you've been here 5 years, you're a native, pretty much.
Pretty much.
You've been here about as long as everybody else.
Everybody else. That's true, you know. I think there are unique parts of that are wonderful, and of course there are parts of it that have cast a long and dark shadow across the South as well. You know, I hit on that in some of the books too, but I think there's a poignancy about the relationship to the land that every person in a rural area feels. I think you're tied to the land by climate and by
your living
and your sport as well. So in some ways, I think that part is the same.
Do you think perhaps some of the people are so patient in the rural areas, in the farming areas, is because there's so much in their life they have no control over?
I think
they
that's
must have to be
absolutely
patient
true.
through it. I mean, we have friends who are farmers, and some years are so terrible, and there's nothing they can do about it.
Well, I think that's true. I mean, I think, you know, we're witnessing it now as a result of the hurricane. The citrus farmers, totally at the...
Nobody's mentioned them. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, just totally at the
All
mercy
farmers.
of nature. I saw a bumper sticker the other day that said, "I don't gamble, I'm a farmer."
It's so true.
So,
it is
you know,
so
I mean,
true.
they're the ultimate gamblers.
But they love it. They love that relation to the land.
Right.
And you in talking about the white buck in your book, it made me understand some of the things that my father-in-law do, because he goes and sits in a tree to hunt. And to a city girl like me from Miami, why would somebody do that? And even though in this book, the main character in this story was not really just hunting,
Right.
I could still feel what was probably going on with my father-in-law when he goes up and when he talked about coming off of his perch and his legs were sore.
Right.
Can you I see you're finding my white buck for me.
Yeah, I thought I would let you see that. That's another Robert Rivers etching. And actually there's an interesting introduction to this story, which in the first several paragraphs I would read to you. But this person's looking for redemption. And the white buck
really wanting it so badly.
Right. His life is crashing down on him. And what interests me about this passage, I think, is it gives some physical presence to a spiritual aspect of life. It gives some physical presence to even life, which is transient and passing and flowing, and has no shadow. In this passage, there's a shadow created. And his friends use the Pythagorean theorem to measure the shadow to figure how long he's going to actually last. And all of that, I think, is a fabrication of my mind and my creative thinking. But I think it's a good passage to read.
Please do.
This is from a leaning tower. All of his decisions seemed to have been made in a vacuum. It appeared to him that whole universes shifted course. Tides appeared to reverse. Rivers flowed back to frigid glacial wombs. His wife was threatening to move out. His kids hated him. His business was balanced on the brink of bankruptcy. The IRS was on his ass for his cash transactions, and he was out of booze. For years, his life had balanced like the leaning tower, surprising everyone, tilted as it was, but still standing. Sightseers came through, tourists over for dinner to admire the slanted stance of his day-to-day. Alcoholic he was, and a rounder at the bars. Late to come in nights, no family life to speak of. Late to work in the AM, and the whole thrust of his life at about 75 degrees. A good 20 off plumb if the bob were dropped. which it was on occasion, and when the line struck plumb in the wilted light of morning, he could see it clear and straight to the earth's center, and he could see the course of his life, and he could reckon that course by a Pythagorean sum, 90 degrees in the length of his life's shadow, at noon being all that were needed to figure his future's overhang. And if his calculations were correct, it was only a matter of time until gravity won the battle. When the vision became clear beyond doubt, he would up from the bed in a slow and strained arc and make it to coffee and a smoke. He needed some miracle, something that could bring big changes fast, forgiveness and a restoration. Now forgiveness is in short supply, and restoration a rarity bordering on the miraculous. So when deer season had started and the trips to deer camp had begun, a miraculous story, as described by Van West, was of particular interest to Marvin. And that's the story of this white buck, which he believes if he can actually find this buck, that his life will, he can make a wish and his life will be straightened out.
A magical buck?
A magical buck, yeah. From that's really, I think, from Native Americans, this idea of this white deer having mystical power.
So he sets out to find it.
He sets out
because it's
to
going
find
to change
it.
it. And you know what really interests me in this part is that usually you think of somebody who is the anti-hero or the bad guy, and you don't think of them ruminating over that and feeling badly about it and worrying about it. You just think of them being bad because they like it. And suddenly you realize he's thinking, oh, you know, that he's really having consequences and having problems with the kind of person he's becoming, the situation he's in.
Exactly, yeah, the situation that he's created himself, yeah.
So he sets out to find the buck.
He sets out to find the buck and waits patiently in the deer stand for this buck, and of course gives up on it overnight. And
doesn't he fall asleep up there?
He falls asleep.
He passes out up there.
He passes out, yeah. He continues to drink till he passes out. But he comes back to the parking lot and finds the deer hanging from a scaffolding rack that two hunters have erected.
And there's quite a
dress it.
picture of that.
Yeah,
here.
there's a beautiful image there Robert had done of the deer.
Terribly beautiful.
Yeah, it's a it's a dark little story. I think it's not a.
And it's a hunting image. There he is. There's his redemption, bleeding, dying,
Right.
dead,
Right.
totally lost
Right.
forever, and he really hates the people who did it.
Right. And I think it's interesting. When I tell people that I make books and I do prints, they often say, "Oh, children's books." The idea that the drawing and the art, because you don't see that much art generally in adult books, and this idea that art and visual art and words go together, I think has always been part of the picture, but it's never been maybe more in the playing field of the visual artist than it has become.
It's usually the author who finds the illustrator.
Right.
It's the
Right, and is frustrated because the illustrator is
not getting his vision.
Not getting his vision, and so in some ways, being both the author and the person who prints the book and designs the book puts me in control of the whole picture.
Of the whole thing. And you know what
Yeah.
else I love? I love the hot sauce.
Oh yeah.
The hot sauce, the descriptions of, and that's something that's also very much in the South, of all the different hot sauces. We're all experts on the different kind. That was the thing I was talking about. Hot sauce that would something about your grandma. What was it? There's a
make you
line
slap your grandma?
May hot sauce so hot it'd make you slap your grandma. I could just taste that one.
Yeah. Well, I think really there is an interest, a growing interest nationally. I think hot sauce has replaced ketchup as the major condiment across America.
It's true.
There are ranges of that, of course. But
and there's one point where you describe it as he wanted it to make him feel like a legion of Gene Kellys
dancing across his tongue.
were dancing across his tongue, and then his
Right.
friends trying to figure that one out.
Well, I think writing is actually creating the kind of image. Friends of mine that know my visual work say, well, the way you write is a very visual experience, that it's not such a cerebral thing as it is a visual experience reading what I write, because I verbally paint a picture.
And you also paint a picture of the internal struggles it's only just not the story of what's going on the outside. There's also what's going on the inside. When the story about the dog, the man with the spoiled daughter who was coming to live with him for a short time and wanted a dog, so he basically rented one.
He rented a dog, yeah.
From a rock star.
Right, who was going on tour.
And tell us what happens then.
Well, the dog, he comes in one evening, and the dog then really instantly fell for the daughter, but hated him from the start, you know. And that's the way it is sometimes with animals. They can just almost tell instantly whether they want to be part of your life and your actions or not. And anyway, this dog did hate him, and he comes in after work one day, and the dog attacks him in the house, and it's
bites his face.
Yeah, bites him. It's quite a big dog, and he ends up shooting the dog in his house. And
it's more like a battle. It's all
it goes on and on.
Assault.
Yeah, it goes on and on. It's a drawn out battle. The dog gets under the couch, and he gets down to try to catch the dog and see if it's dead, and the dog attacks him when he's down, and then it goes on and on. It's a long
And he certainly
story.
has no compassion for the animal.
No, he doesn't.
Is it dead yet?
Yeah, well, it's true. I mean, you know, the stories, some of these stories are really dark, I think.
But they were interesting, and it was interesting to see how his mind was working as this was going on. He was wondering if the dog was dead, if it was dying, if he was going to shoot it. Meanwhile, his house was
being wrecked.
A murder scene.
Right.
And he's concerned about the people coming and the police coming and finding out his secret life.
Yeah, his unlicensed gun collection and all of his Nazi memorabilia and this compilation of...
You know what I noticed? He didn't really worry about what his daughter was going to think when she found out what he did to her dog.
Well, I think he was concerned about what the daughter was going to think. I mean, there's a passage in there where he ends up shooting a hole in the washing machine trying to hit the dog when it turns a corner.
And when she turns the water on, it's going to all come out.
Right, and he realizes he's going to be caught by his daughter, and that actually bothers him as much as the fact that, you know, the neighbors are going to come shortly from the bullets going through the walls and the sounds of the gunshots. So yeah, it's a pretty intense an intense story,
but it's not disturbing.
Well,
it's interesting. It's very interesting.
I think in so many of my stories, there's a grain of truth there. I mean, I know an episode similar to that in my past, so not in my personal past.
Suddenly, nobody wants the books anymore.
But you know, I
You've
think,
known of somebody else who had gone through this.
Well, yes, I know of a similar relationship with a dog that turned bad. But you know, I think the ability to take those stories and to turn them into tragicomic episodes and episodes that render the characters and reveal the characters of these people. And
it becomes so human.
Yeah, they're human. All the people in my stories are human. I think.
Do you have a favorite of this group?
A favorite? Oh, I hadn't thought about that.
I love the quote from the sheriff viewing at
sure.
a coroner's office.
Right. Yeah, that was the quote actually before
this whole massacre of the dog.
Dog, right? Yeah, that's. Let me see if I can find that one. That's Sheriff Ed Rainey.
And it's wonderful, and it just, you know, in just very, very few words, really puts things into perspective.
When a man wounds a rattlesnake with a .22 caliber pistol and crawls under his house with a flashlight to find the injured creature and kill it, you can be sure that in just a few brief moments, the per capita IQ of this state will climb just a small percentage of a point. And that's from Sheriff Dale Vaughn while viewing a snakebite victim with the county coroner.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm going back to the hot sauce thing, and I'm going to ask you to read one more thing again about the different hot sauces and how it becomes. And I see that does happen in places where people really know each other very well. They tend to start having this almost competition of little things that most of us really go through life without really taking a very close look at. And the hot sauce, you really took a close look at hot sauce. It became something very important to know the intricacies and the different types of hot sauce.
Okay, so Hot sauce. So what about it? Asked Billy J., known to his friends as Blue or Blue J or simply BJ. Is it that mind-bending, fart-sweating, bug-eyed, watering, red-faced stuff we're looking for? Or is it just some other relish? Would you chip dip it, pour it on your eggs and grits, sprinkle it on your collard greens or what? Tell me now so we can get on with this trip. I ain't gonna waste no time on no hot sauce I can get at a 7-Eleven, Quick Pick, Mighty Mart kind of place. Martin was struck dumb. His ears were burning. The back of his neck was tingling, but mostly there was a stabbing series of lightning strikes moving down his sinuses. One big bolt jumped from side to side and made his eyes water. He set down the tablespoon, still half full of sauce, on the stump next to the iron pot full of the boiling liquid and shook his head at Billy J. BJ tried a spoonful. It's okay, he said. Then he scooped up another taste and continued. It's hot, but it don't have much flavor. What I absolutely require is unique flavor. Got to have that special flavor, that very special something, make my taste buds move like a legion of Gene Kellys.
And I can see that. Can we show the picture that goes with it, the hot sauce? And we showed it a little bit earlier when you talked about the color process.
Right. Yeah, the image is the cosmic pepper wheel.
The cosmic pepper wheel, and there it is, the hot sauce. And the colors are just so beautiful, and I can just see his taste buds dancing when you take a look at this. It's just so incredibly beautiful. Now, these books are collector's items.
Right.
And people need to get them from you. And
from Flying Horse Editions Press, which is the university art department press. We publish, the press publishes other poets and other writers and other artists, visual artists, and Brian Burkhart's the director of that operation. And, you know, they sell my books as well as the books that they produce for the art department, which is a wonderful advantage for the art department because it brings in writers and artists who come to work on books and make prints. They come in and talk to our students about their lives as artists and critique the student work and
maybe inspire the students to be the next generation of doing this.
Well, I hope so. I hope that's the end result of all this. And that's why I ended up at a university doing these things.
Well, we are very, very lucky to have you here. Keith Francis, thank you so much for sharing these gorgeous, gorgeous books. And if they tend to disappear from the studio, I don't know where they went. Don't look at my house.
We'll send you a bill.
Sounds good. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm Charna Davis-Wiese. Thank you for joining us, and join us next time for UCF in Print.